Welcome into Inside Carolina Postgame. I'm Tommy Ashley. That is Rob Harrington. We are sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Go to Inside Carolina. Sign up for your premium subscription. Get all the stuff you need to follow Carolina basketball, football, baseball, Olympic sports, everything you can imagine there at I just saw your private message, Rob. You threw me off. We start these 15 minutes after the final horn. There was none of that. I saw the chat, and now I can't get.
There's some theorizing in the chat about what you might be up to.
Had to do stuff. Had to get a drink. Had to put something in the He's Not cup and get rolling. But Rob, Carolina wins the game that I quite frankly think they didn't have a chance, or they had a chance, but they needed some things to go right because Louisville, I felt, was just too good and did what Carolina didn't. But Carolina came out from the start and played well. Your take, and then we'll dig into it.
Absolutely a great win. I know by record and ranking, you wouldn't necessarily think that at home. One might not think that at home. But given the way that Louisville plays, as you said, they have played the Carolina's weaknesses. But the Heels, until that last few minutes, they had them under control. I mean, that run in the 15 straight shots that Louisville missed was one of the best defensive stretches of the season. And they needed it because if you told me that Louisville would shoot pretty solidly on threes, I think 36, 37%, they beat Carolina on the glass. Carolina once again missed a lot of free throws. And yet the game really wasn't as close as the score. I mean, the Heels did a lot of things right. They once again went over 50% from the field, shot threes pretty well. And defensively, I thought this was maybe their best all-around defensive game of the season.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just a few stats. And, folks, if you're in the live chat and it is bumping and I can't keep up with it, I'll try to find some questions to ask when we get to it. There's a lot of points we're going to talk about. And we're almost at 1,000 people in here. So I need you to hit the like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not already. Let's look at some stats, Rob, to your point. 54% for Carolina, 39% for Louisville. Both shot 36% from three. Louisville hit 14. Free throws. You and Joey talked about it the other day. Greg and I have talked about it on Inside Carolina Dailies. This is going to bite Carolina in the rear end eventually. Thought it was going to do it tonight if Louisville had hit a couple more shots. I mean, let's start with the bad. What is the problem? I mean, there is simply no reason that this Carolina team should shoot that poorly from the free throw line. And it's not like they've got a big man that can't shoot free throws. It's the guards. Your take on that, because it's troublesome.
Yeah, they obviously have to fix that, and they certainly know it. It's been a little too much of a recurring pattern now, I'm sure, for everyone's comfort level. Yeah, I guess the nice thing is as you close out the regular season, the number of things the team needs to talk about will diminish because they aren't going to put any more wrinkles probably into the game plan. So hopefully at practice they'll have additional time to work on that. I'm confident they'll turn it around. As you said, certainly it could bite them. I don't at heart think they're a bad free throw shooting team. I think this is a slump, and we'll find out.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. And of course, we got to talk about Seth Trimble. Somebody says it takes a 30-point game from Seth Trimble to win a 3-point game at home. I mean, it's a team sport, right, Rob? And when somebody steps up, you take it and run. Trimble, he disappeared since the Duke game. And that emotional high of the Duke game maybe took something out of him, maybe, like you said, a slump or whatever. But 11 for 16, 7 for 11 from the line. He wasn't settling for three-pointers. He was getting to the rim. Other than the Memphis game, which did not count, I'm not sure I've seen Seth Trimble play a better all-around game than he played tonight.
Absolutely right. I think that especially in a situation where everyone expected Louisville's guards to give Carolina a lot of trouble, especially after what we saw last week against NC State, you sort of identify this huge weakness. And Trimble made sure tonight that he obviously more than held his own. He brought a lot of physicality to it. I love the way that he pushed tempo. Louisville wants to take a lot of threes. Sometimes their court balance defensively isn't very good. And that enabled Carolina to get some transition looks, mostly from Trimble. But even in half court, He was physically attacking the rim. He wasn't moving the ball around as much in the air when he did that. You know, that one play in the first half where he went off 2 feet and cocked it back on the guy. He was never going to get that dunk, but he went up so authoritatively that they had to call a foul. And that's exactly what you want from him.
Yeah, and I mean, when he's attacking the basket, I did not like the shot early in the shot clock late where he got blocked there and gave Louisville a little bit of life late. But, 30 points on that shooting, and that's the most by any Carolina player. If you had that on your bingo card to start the season with the way Caleb Wilson has been playing, I'm impressed. I need some parlay information from you if you're saying Seth Trimble would be the leading scorer. Topping out. We're talking with Rob Harrington here on the Inside Carolina postgame. Carolina 77, Louisville 74 in a game Carolina had to have ACC standings, NCAA standings wise, against a hot Louisville team. So people in the chat, I love Zayden High. Talk about Zayden High. How is Rob impressed with Zayden High's performance? Look, when that guy stays in his lane and doesn't try to do things that he cannot do, which he did a couple tonight. I mean, they showed the graphic. He's averaging over 12, over 9. There's not a universe in anywhere that you would not take that from Zayden High, and he was solid again tonight.
He has been outstanding in such a bright spot. It's an old Carolina thing, back to the Dean Smith days where someone goes out and then a player who doesn't play a lot steps up and suddenly is perfectly ready for that role. I never would have expected High was going to be that person because his minutes were so rough most of the year. And the other thing about this, Tommy, is I think there is a salutary effect because High's energy and aggression is rubbing off on some of the other guys, especially Jaren Stevenson, who I think has been more physical lately, maybe in part because High is bringing that style to the court. Stevenson, I believe, had 7 rebounds tonight. It's the parallel is when Kendall Marshall got to Carolina and he started making all those great hit-ahead passes. And then Larry Drew started to do the same thing. And Roy Williams said, I think Larry is seeing Kendall do this and he's looking for it now himself. And so that type of thing does exist. So I wonder if Stevenson, not necessarily in a competitive way for minutes, maybe a little bit, but more just, hey, High's being really effective. I can do this too. And on top of it, Stevenson is now shooting much more confidently from 3. I think those two have done a fantastic job of filling in for Caleb Wilson. And for that matter, I don't think Veesaar is healthy. I know that he's been out there. He played 30 minutes tonight. And I thought he was good defensively from the standpoint he wasn't fouling, but he wasn't as active on the glass. In general, I still think he's a little creaky. I thought the same thing against Syracuse. I don't think he's fully back yet. So there's even more pressure on the other guys, and mostly Stevenson and High, to carry the load in the front court. And I think they've been more than up to it.
Yeah, 100% they've been up to it. And I might push back a little bit on the Veesaar thing. The rebounding is a problem. He has 2 on the official stat sheet. I don't remember but 1. But when he drove from the left side of the wing against Syracuse and had that one-handed dunk, I'm not sure you can do that if you're not pretty healthy. He may not be 100%, but yeah, he's definitely not rebounding as much as they need him to. But they're getting it done otherwise. You mentioned Stevenson, only 9 points, but it was a big 9 points and those 7 rebounds. And then Zayden High, 4 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, the 2 turnovers, but the whole bag of enthusiasm, we'll call it that. He gets folks fired up. And I didn't get a chance to talk in the post game, but I like what he did against Syracuse when he had something to say about that foul on Stevenson. Carolina needs more players like that. Y'all know from watching these shows how I feel about letting teams push you around without any pushback. And Zayden High sort of brings some of that pushback. And then before I flip to the other side of the court, Luka Bogavac continues to get more comfortable, or at least make more plays in the lane. He still has a what are we doing sometimes moment, but he's gotten where he's figured out, Rob, how to deal with the physicality, I guess you want to say, and he gets the ball on the rim, and he makes some nice drives and nice layups. 5 for 10 tonight, hit a couple of threes for 12 points. I mean, he's stepped up as well.
He certainly has, and I think he's caught up to the speed of the American game, and the way that is translating is he's not doing as much stuff when he's in the lane in terms of sidestepping and pausing and flipping up an underhanded shot. That stuff wasn't working for him. He's being much more economical with his dribbles. He's getting the ball into the glass. It took some months for him to get there. I think if he comes back, who knows? But I think if he comes back, he could have a really big season now because he has an entire summer to adjust to what he has experienced here. And I think you're seeing him become the player he can be. Not that would be a dominant player, but he is able to create some. And lately, I think also his decision-making has improved. Fewer of the YOLO threes. I think he's figured out his own team's system and what is available to him in this style of play.
Yeah, a lot of people in the chat referencing who's Carolina beaten this year, and they've got certainly a good resume. They've built a good resume beating teams that are solid. Certainly much different from last year when they didn't really beat anybody. But yeah, they've done that, and of course Kansas is on TV right now playing Houston. So that's a. Did you see the stat? And this is a diversion, but Kansas hadn't lost back-to-back games at home since 88-89. That blows me away, given how difficult their schedule can be sometimes. Anyway, I digress.
I think you should have Roy Williams on this show and ask him that question. You were the last one to do that. Is this a record you would like to see broken?
Really, Roy?
He would appreciate that.
How do you manage to set all sorts of records, good and bad, at Kansas? But again, talking with Rob Harrington here on the post game. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and shout out to the 1,400 people here in the live chat. I need 1,000 likes on the YouTube and I need new subscribers. So if you're watching this, subscribe to the channel. Of course, you can check it out on the audio version as well and go to Inside Carolina for all the. We will write up some clips from this if you're not a listener or a comprehender like I am sometimes. I need to read it to comprehend the brilliance that Rob brings. Let's talk about the defensive end. I thought they were as physical with Louisville and as Jay Will kept saying, you got to stay in their pocket for the most part. I thought this was the best defensive performance. You referenced it earlier against a team who, if you give them space, they will shoot you out of the gym. And Louisville was unable to get free too often, and Carolina made them pay on the scoreboard ultimately.
I think this is what a Hubert Davis defense is supposed to look like. This is what he wants it to be, is where they take away. I mean, I know Louisville shot pretty well on threes. That's their game. But they forced them to take a very high volume of them and some bad ones, including in that stretch where they missed 15 shots in a row. Carolina was handling their switches much better than they have been most of the season. Carolina still was switching, but they were aggressive. So that they were still doing their contained style. They were sticking home with shooters, but they were winning more of their one-on-one matchups defensively. And so even if the driver got past, they weren't losing contact. The defensive player is able to sort of ride him to a spot into Veesaar, especially Veesaar, who's not really blocking shots, but he's just challenging. You saw Louisville over and over again attack Veesaar, but they weren't in a great position to do it because the defensive player was on the shoulder. So they didn't have a real clean attempt until late in the game. They got some, but for the most part, I thought those were the keys defensively: staying home on the shooters, winning some of those one-on-one defensive matchups. Louisville's center spent way too much time with the ball in his hands. It was like he was Joker out there and all these dribble handoffs. And I know that's not what they want. The reason they happen is because Carolina was taking the better players away. The more no shot at him. That he's not a skilled offensive player. The more he's handling out on the perimeter with his back turned to the rim, the better off you are. And that's what the Heels were able to do to them for almost all of the game.
Yeah, with the way the game started, I thought Mikel Brown was going to have 30, and Carolina tightened up on him. And then Hadley, of course, with 14, and Conwell. That dude's a beast as well with his. And then Isaac McNeely, who so many people in this live chat and on that message board fretted when Carolina didn't get him last year, did nothing. 0 for 5 from 3, 0 for 5 overall. 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 foul in 24 minutes. He was actually +2 for Louisville. And somebody in the chat, yes, Kyan Evans was +10. You got to give him props for that. But the defense on McNeely, Brown's a different animal. Conwell's a different animal. They completely wiped out the third prong of that, Rob, and that's another one of those things. It's not just the primary guy that they pushed. They covered everybody. And to your point, and you can elaborate further, that's exactly what Hubert Davis has preached for a long time, and we just hadn't seen it.
That's right. They aren't trying to shoot passing lanes. They are doing a little better recently, I think, getting turnovers. I don't know what the numbers say. My sense is they're getting a few more turnovers, but by and large, this is what they want it to look like. You don't get free threes. You don't get free runs to the rim. You certainly do not get runs to the rim going down the middle. And so these are the core principles of Hubert's defense. There is going to be switching. There's going to be some variability in terms of how they handle pick and roll. Veesaar is not a hedge kind of guy. Doesn't work when he does it. So in drop coverage, once again, Louisville the guards were trying to get ahead of steam and go into his chest. It's not the first time people have tried it. It didn't work at all. He was very good about not fouling. I think in general, Carolina's entire team is well schooled and well coached about not fouling, not having silly fouls. And so all of that worked in their favor. I mean, ultimately, if you can get Louisville taking a contested 2 with all of their 3-point firepower, that's a pretty good deal when you play a team like that. Also Alabama, also Florida State. These analytics heavy teams that shoot a lot of threes, if you can get them taking 2s, by definition, you've taken them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, and I mean, it looked like Louisville was lost there. I still can't. 15 straight shots they missed. I mean, that is solid defense from Carolina. But last point we're going to make about this game, we talk all the time about finishing defensive possessions. Louisville had 16 offensive rebounds. Granted, only 13 second chance points. So that worked out, but you cannot give up 16 offensive rebounds against a team that shoots threes like that normally. That's another thing along with free throws, Rob, that will get you beat, especially in a one and done type situation. That's a crazy number to give up against that team.
It is, and that's a tough one because without Caleb Wilson, and I know we might say it a little bit differently. I think Veesaar he's not holding his ground as well. I guess that's what I see and he's not playing with as much leverage. He's never been a power player, but he's not getting the leverage around the rim, I think, to get more rebounds. And then when you take Wilson being absent, High is working real hard on the glass. Stevenson is working hard on the glass, but they need more help. The guards need to step up and do more. They will have some possessions where they block out really well, and it looks like, okay, they're getting it. And then too much of the time, though, they lose contact, and so that's the other thing they need to clean up. Probably from a schematic perspective in practice, that would be the one they'd work on, and then hopefully just have some free time on the free throws. But those will be, I think, the two areas that the coaching staff comes away with as talking points.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go get the ball, and there's some boxing out, and you're not going to get the ball, and then your guards have to rebound on long threes, and they didn't really tonight. I mean, Trimble had 4, Bogavac had 3, but Evans had 1 in limited minutes. Powell, who's rebounded really well for this team, he had 1. Dixon had 1. I mean, you just got to collectively rebound better. And we talked about Veesaar only having 2, so that's a problem. So Carolina gets the win against Louisville. Greg Barnes and I talked about it earlier, the importance of this win for seeding purposes in the ACC and all that. And I see a lot of people in the chat want to play NC State again. Well, I think to do that, you're probably going to need to be either the 4 or 5 in the ACC. So Carolina's on track there going forward. But Rob, you got Virginia Tech. I believe they said that game's at 8:30. Weird time Saturday night. It's perfect, though, because I got baseball in the afternoon. But as we go down the stretch, 3 games left, they just get more and more important. Doesn't matter who is on the other side of the court for Carolina.
I thought this week, par would have been 1-1 because Louisville was such a bad matchup. As much as I like to talk about Carolina protecting their home court, which they've been magnificent this season in doing that. But they got the one tonight. So punctuate that with a 2-0 week. Clemson, to me, is not as dangerous or as bad a matchup as Louisville. Famous last words. I think Carolina should beat them at home. Take that momentum into Cameron. swing for the fences, take your shot, and then worst case, you still have a very strong finish to the year in the injured condition that they're in. It would send a signal. Not only would it improve their seeding in the ACC tournament and give them still at least a shot at a double bye, certainly lock up a single bye, but it would send a signal to the tournament selection committee, the big tournament, that, hey, this is a good all-around team. And so, yes, you have your All-American, but even without that All-American, they're getting Q1 wins. So I think that further bolsters the case for them getting a high seed, and maybe they can creep up. Before I was saying, let's not drop below a number 7. Now I'm saying, okay, looking good for something higher than that. Maybe see if you can take it up from there. Still games to play, but I think they've done more than what people would have expected from them. The state game obviously was a setback and ugly, but apart from that, I think these guys have done a great job rallying, to offset the loss of a player you truly can't replace.
Absolutely. And I mean, they showed him repeatedly on the sidelines, completely engaged. None of that stuff that's going on in Kansas. Caleb Wilson all in 100%, says he wants to be back for the Duke game. That'll make that one very interesting. It's going to be tough either way for Carolina, but you're right. Virginia Tech's winnable. Certainly Clemson is winnable the way they've slidden down. They got to clean up a few things. The stall ball late, or the letting the foot off the gas and letting teams back in it and then not making free throws is troubling. And it could be what we talk about when this season ends as what caused the end. But right now, Carolina picked up a good win against Louisville, a quad 1 win. To your point, Rod, that's interesting. What did you think when the selection committee, last question, when the selection committee said we're going to evaluate Carolina differently without those injured guys? I'm kind of torn on how that works, because just because somebody plays doesn't mean they're hurt. You know what I mean? So I guess the tournament sort of seeing things differently rather than as a monolith. But your thoughts on their evaluation of this Carolina team like they are now versus when they had Caleb Wilson, because they had a couple bad losses with Caleb Wilson too.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they were tracking, depending on how you think about the Miami game, whether you consider the team to be healthy for that game. I would say probably not. We're tracking for around a number 5 seed. Post-Duke, around a number 5. And then I think since then, the state game was ugly against a peer team in the seeding hierarchy this year. So when they're competing with, but for the most part, as we've said, they've recovered from it. They've gotten good wins because we know that the back half of the ACC schedule was tougher than the front half when they had Wilson healthy. So to the extent that they're a worse team, certainly they're not as good without him. No one would say that. But they've shown you that they have a variety of guys who can compete and be successful. I'm not too stressed or fussed about what the committee is saying right now because I think Carolina this year is in a sufficiently lofty position to get evaluated on wins and losses. So whatever fingers on the scale the committee does on injuries, I think they have enough wins to get what they deserve. If they catch a little bit of a break because Wilson's out, then okay. But in general, I think the most sort of depressing episode where they did something like that was in football, actually, with Florida State a few years ago, where guy gets hurt and it's like they're not good anymore, and that angered a lot of people, especially because it went in favor of Alabama. Thankfully the basketball tournament, this isn't at least in Carolina's case, it's not a make the tournament or miss the tournament situation. I think when you stockpile this many high profile wins, because the people on there are not math nerds by and large, they're going to look at Carolina's resume and see Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisville, UVA, which is on track for a top 4 seed. And that's a really strong slate of wins just in that grouping right there. And I think when they sit down that weekend to see the teams, they're going to see this team as one that can step up and beat a number 1 seed potentially. And so maybe that gets you to a number 5 instead of a number 6. But I think that's where my mind is. If they could win the next 3 or the next 2 rather, even if they don't win at Duke, win a couple in the ACC tournament, maybe they have a good case for being a 5, and then you have a 5-12 in a 5-4 second round game with a tough, obviously tough, but a good shot at making the second weekend.
Makes it interesting, makes it fun to watch, fun to cover, and always fun to do these shows with you, Rob. Appreciate you doing it. For those that don't know, Rob's in blizzard conditions. I saw where Providence, Rhode Island had 32.8 inches of snow. We would be shut down in North Carolina for a month if that happened here. So safe travels and safe everything up that way for everybody. But 1,500 people in the live chat. It's always awesome to have the Inside Carolina crowd. Do me a favor, like I said earlier, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, rate, review, join Inside Carolina, watch the podcast, baseball stuff. It's a lot going on. Rob, appreciate it.